research methodology session. I think we are ready for that. Without further ado, I would now like to invite the moderator for the research methodology session. So the moderator of this session is a senior lecturer, a professor from the Department of Building Economics who supervise unlimited number of MSc students as well as PhD students. A lovely person to meet, a lovely person to be appreciated. So let me warmly welcome Professor Udayangani Kulathunga on the stage to moderate the research methodology session. Shall we give a good round of applause to our professor?
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the session on research methodology. And for this session, we have two esteemed speakers. The first speaker is Professor Dilushan Jayasundara, and then the next speaker will be Dr. Ranga Rodrigo. So first I will introduce Professor Dilushan. Professor Dilushan is a professor of material sciences in the Department of Physics at University of Colombo. His research expertise is centered on material science and nanotechnology, and his contributions in these fields are reflected in his extensive publications record in reputed journals and conferences. He has also supervised a number of postgraduate students and served as a reviewer for leading journals and conferences. I think an experience that strongly enriches his understanding of high-quality research writing and scholarly communication. Today, he will guide us through a session on research paper deconstruction, analysis, and adaptability in research writing, an area that is vital for all of us. So, Professor Dilushan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Udayangani, for that kind introduction. And congratulations to the 3MT winners and the participants, and very good morning to you. Right. So, I've been given the task of a very long title, right? I was supposed to speak initially on the first one, but the second one was added to me, but I said it's fine, right? So in a way, since I was initially planning to do on the first one, my slides are, I will be talking to you in two different aspects, right? So it's divided into two, okay? And if you want to know a little bit about, I think it's not working, so about my research, there's a QR code. I think part of it's missing. I think still you can scan, right? You will be able to get some information about the work we do in terms of research and the vacancies we may have for postgraduate students. So when it comes to these topics, I'm going to present these topics with mostly with my own examples, right? And there are certain limits I had to put beforehand. I'm using some of the images which I am not going to take credit for. It's just for teaching purposes. So these images does not belong to me. It's for the original whoever who has done that, so that I have to give that credit to them. This is basically I'm talking to you about writing original research publications, right? So it's basically for original research, not reviews, not letters, not communication. So it's basically original research, publishing original research. And I assume before I start, I want to know a little bit about the audience, right? How many of you are undergraduates here? Right? Quite a number of undergraduates. Postgraduates? More or less equal numbers. Academics, whom I should be scared of, my God. Right. So, but with that, I suppose all of you are at the moment are involved in some kind of research. Am I right? Right. So then only, so that means basically, you know, I'm not going to talk to you about getting good data, right? That's a different topic. So I assume you are competent in your experimental work, right? So with that assumption, only I am going to move forward into the publishing aspect. Okay? Right. So the next question, the next one I am going to put here is these two beautiful pictures, images. Out of this, doesn't fly. You have better laser pointer. Oh, that's fine, that's fine. So anyway, you can see these two, right? So in your opinion, what do you think? Which picture would you like the most? Right? How many like the left one? Right? How many like the right one? I need to see the hands, guys, come on. Right. So most of you like the right one, right? I think I am also, this is okay, right? Still this is okay. But this is more attractive, right? I think a lot of people agree on that. So if you consider your research data, right? If you consider your research data, if you are the researchers who are involved in it, obviously you like this. You like your research. You like your research data, isn't it? Right? We all like our research data. But does everybody like it? No. Right? Not everyone. Most people, as you said, like this. So how do you get this research data, which you and I so much in love with, to make sure that everybody loves it, right? So a lot of people love it. Thanks. This is a cheap one I bought, so it's not working. Right. So let me figure out how to work this one out. Oops. Right. So we want to make our research data, my research data, your research data, into something that more people would love, right? That more people would love. And how would you do that? Right? How would you do that? So that's what I'm going to give you with some of our own examples, right? Some of my own examples I am going to show you. This doesn't mean I'm doing any manipulation, right? Data manipulation. It's simply the same person. You can see it's the same person. Otherwise, I'm in trouble, right? You have the same person presented in a different way, in a more attractive way, where you said most of you like it. And how are you going to do that? In your research. And that is when it comes to publishing, writing your work, right? Writing your work. Guys, please know I have students who are fantastic in the lab. They work really hard. They work really hard. But most of the time their grades, they couldn't publish, their grades are low. What is the reason? The communication, the presenting of data. If your research is 40%, your presentation is 60%, right? So you need to work on how you present your data. That's really important, as all of you here is evidence. Everyone likes the right-hand side one. Now let's move. How are we going to do that? So what I'm going to do that, I'm going to use one of our own examples, right? And tell you how we did it, right? To a certain extent. I'm not saying that we are so successful, right? If I'm so successful, that would have gone into nature or science, right? It didn't go there, right? So, but we are enthusiastic about what we do. So I'm going to I selected this paper, right? Which is something I think I'm not going to go to any of the technical details, so don't worry about it, right? But I think everyone knows part of the topic, antibacterial coating for fruit peeling. I think that is pretty simple enough, right? For everyone to, even for a general audience to go with, right? The first part is you have some materials. I'm a material scientist, so there is a material there, right? Don't worry about it, okay? Now, why I selected this paper is several things. This is a multidisciplinary research, right? This is a multidisciplinary research. I come from a physics department. We have chemists here. We have technology people here. We have food scientists, right? So it's a multidisciplinary research done by interdisciplinary set of people, group of people, right? So that's the beauty of it, collaboration, right? You have to form your collaborations while you are a graduate student. That is really important, right? And then, in a general research paper, of course, you have done your literature survey at the very beginning, right? All of you start your research with a literature survey. And you have seen how the papers are written, what are the main points, the topics in a paper, right? So what do you have? You have the introduction. This is also not working. No, that's fine, right? So you have an introduction. You have the experimental section. You have the results and discussion. These are the three big topics you will find in a research paper. Right? Okay. Now, so I'm going to basically, it says this term, deconvolute and analyze. So I'm also trying to figure out how to do this, right, with this. Let me know, when should you, how many of you, when do you think you have to start writing the first draft of a manuscript? At what point? At what point? Anyone here? How many of you like somewhere half into the research or fully completed? How many of you, by the way, having already published work? Okay, there is number. So at what time maybe you started thinking about your first draft? From the first idea itself, okay? Anyone else? Okay, substantial results. So you, I mean, anyone else wants to contribute here with different idea? Okay, that means there are already there are two ideas. So it depends on individually at what point you're going to start. So what I'm going to say is when I start, right? When do I start seriously writing the first draft for a manuscript? I generally adopt a procedure when I see the core purpose of that particular research results. So in this case, that's why I'm taking this as an example, antibacterial coating for fruit peeling. If it's antibacterial, it should work, right? When I see my first evidence of my material working, right, then I start writing the methodology part for that particular section. I am generally like the methodology because two reasons is that's yours, right? You already know. So then when I first get a hint of my work is working, I'm getting the results I want, I start writing. But be careful, in the next slide or the one after that, I say there can be some exceptions, right? But at the moment, this is what it is. So where do I start writing this one? I'm sure you can see. So this is antibacterial, that means with this coating, you have to kill bacteria. So what is the most important evidence here? A broken down cell. So this is E. coli, and you can see this cell at certain points. You can see broken pieces or damages to this cell wall. So that's an indication that my hypothesis or what I embarked on is working. So I start writing. Is that enough? I need to verify because I am an experimentalist, right? So I want to make sure I can repeat the same thing because there had been a lot of cases where people have to withdraw publications because the others cannot repeat it, right? And not themselves cannot repeat it, then it's a problem. So you repeat and confirm that these are working, right? So I have my core. So there are two things, antimicrobial, I have done, fruit peel. That means it has to go to fruit peel. So what we did is we applied to banana as a coating, and we were able to see the process or the freshness, or rather the banana was, we can keep the banana almost more than the double the time without a banana with the coating, without the coating, right? So we have now the main evidence is there. So we start writing, right? And when we write methodology, right, I think Ranga is going to talk a little bit more on the methodology. It is important we write the methodology so another person can repeat our work. Why it is very important? When you read the research paper, where do you get the methodology from? If it is something, some of the work, you get the methodology from reading a methodology in another journal. Why a good methodology is good? Very important. If that reading person will cite you for your methodology, right? So you got already a citation there, okay? And then, now when you have the larger one, so you know the results are there, but then you need the supporting, right? How do I know that it is this particular combination that is doing this, right? Now, of course, there is an option. You can start dividing into two, antibacterial, show that antibacterial, publish that, right? And so the fruit peel, publish that. But if you want to go to a very good high impact journal, it's important you have the whole picture in one, okay? Whole picture in one. So when we go to, so I have the basic fundamental part set, but there is a lot of gaps. How do I know that it is that combination of material that is working here? So I have to prove. Now, based on this, while this is the core, you need supporting results, right? One is, it is the controls. Controls are really important. The first control is with the coating, without the coating. So controls are really important in your research, right? To prove that whatever you are proposing is working against a control, right? And then you have to make sure your material, which part of the material is more active, right? There comes, you are building the rest of the paper, results and discussion. So the rest of the results in support of this will come afterwards. So gradually you are writing your paper in a more logical, coherent manner. And generally, we researchers and scientists, we are very biased to our work, very biased to our work, which is really bad, right? I happen to be a product of two supervisors, one my PhD supervisor and my postdoctoral supervisor, who are very critical about their own research. They were the ones, I've never seen people who are so critical about their own work. I think to a certain extent it has gone to me also, right? You have to be the critique of your own work, because that helps you to fine tune so you're looking at every possible way of confirming your results yourself before you send it for peer review, right? You are the critic of your own work. I think we are lacking that aspect pretty much among our scientists, especially the young scientists, right? Don't be biased to your work. Let the data talk. Let the data talk, right? I'll come back to that, how important when you let the data talk, what happens, right? So now you have completed your results and discussion. Along with that, you build the experimental part, right? And be creative. Some journals, they put a page limit or a word limit, right? Here, of course, you have more words. So this particular one was published in American Chemical Society Omega Open Access Journal. It's open access, 300,000, I think the USD, the journal fee. Luckily, we got a fee waiver, right? Full fee waiver for this. But we have to concise it to the page limits. We came up with, okay, what is the most attractive way to put our methodology? That is where we can because you can put a lot of things into the appendix, right? So what we did, we graphically presented in a schematic the entire process of doing work, including the characterization. At what point, what characterizations are being done. So entire thing is put in a schematic, and the details were sent to, part of the details were sent to the, basically the appendix. You are telling a story. Research journal publication is a story you tell, right? And then so basically our approach is start with the results, work along and the methodology. I generally tend to go last to the introduction, right? Okay? I know there are some of others also who do that, but I don't know in general, but I tend to go to the last for the introduction. There is a reason for that. Journals, they want novelty. When you go through this, now you know the entire picture of the story, right? Now you can go to the introduction and do the introduction in such a way it highlights, align with what you have actually obtained, right? Actually obtained. And the other reason is you generally tend to do the literature survey before you start your research, right? At the end of research, when you do the literature survey, you come across not only you who have this idea, there are plenty of other people who may have the idea, right? And then you capture those literature. There may be a situation, we had that situation twice, where the same work was unfortunately published before us by some other people. Now the novelty is at stake. Now we have completed this, how are you going to go forward? You get frustrated. Some of our students, especially undergraduates, they get frustrated when their hypothesis doesn't work, when they are not getting data. That's fine, novelty is fine, that's fine. We will say our work, it's the way you pitch. Our work, there are minimum number of, or there is only a few publications in this particular field. Our work contribute to that field, right? So there is a way you put this, right? Even though it's not novel, we are contributing, right? We are contributing because there is not many. Only one or two have popped up very recently, that's all. So we are also contributing to that work. So it's the way you put it. So that's why I read the introduction last. But then you know what are the novel, what is there at the moment, at that time, what is published, right? And then of course, in this particular one, what is the real problem you're going to solve, right? So as you can see here, can I get my water bottle, please? As you can see here, this work is basically targeting post-harvest loss, right? It's basically targeting post-harvest loss, mitigating post-harvest loss. If you see, 40% of our food goes into waste due to microbial activity. So we convincingly put our research problem, the problem that we are going to handle, as an highlight in the introduction, right? As an highlight in the introduction. And of course, in this case, it basically aligns well with the UN SDGs. It basically aligns well with the national importance, innovation, and all that. So these are all positives that you can put later on into the introduction before you send it for peer review, right? And finally, so you have everything, right? You have all, but then you have to do what the movie guys do. What do they do? The movie trailer, right? The movie trailer. You need something to show, get the attention of your readers to read into the paper, and that comes from the graphical abstract. More and more journals now require a graphical abstract, which is the trailer for your research paper, right? Which is the trailer for your research paper. So that is important, really important. You have a very compelling, very attractive graphical abstract. I generally don't want to put tables or graphs in there. It has to be very pictorial, right? Very much pictorial, right? So this is what you find. So this entire paper of mine is in one slide over here, right? So this is what you will have in your publication. These are the things you need to focus on when you are writing your manuscript, right? So we had this all, we are very happy, just like the first picture I showed you of Angelina Jolie, right, without makeup. We are very happy, a fantastic, beautiful piece of work, right? But what happened? Thank you for submitting your manuscript to this journal. After careful evaluation, I regret to inform you that your manuscript does not fit within the scope of the journal and I must therefore reject, right? Multiply by 4 times. But this is the lowest I had. There was one which went for 8 rejections, right? 8 rejections. We published a review article which went for 15 rejections, right? So rejection is part of publication, get used to it, right? Get used to it. There's no way you're going to get over it. It's part of this work, right? But you know what happened? It got published with a full APC waiver, right? And not only that, we have a patent, right? We have a patent. And now we are negotiating with a company for commercialization. See? So it never ends in one place. Rejection is not a no, right? It's not a no. Of course, when you make up, some people, without makeup you all like, some people if the makeup part is not right, right, what will happen? So the reviewers didn't see the importance of this and they rejected it. Of course, they rejected by a little bit more higher index impact factor journals, but we are happy, right? We are happy, okay? And after you publish every journal, please celebrate and have a party, right? So this is the deconstruction and analysis. Deconstruction and analysis, right? I hope you got an idea about how to structure a manuscript, where the focus points should be, what are the main points, and based on those main points, you build the entire manuscript and submit. Be ready for rejections, right? Rejections are good in a way, right? Sorry I forgot to put my stopwatch. How long have I taken so far? Oh, okay, right. So this is this part. I hope, Gayatri, you are happy with what I have shown you? Okay, right. So let's go to the next part. So this is the added part, adaptability in research writing. Right, what do I have here? I think I saw one of the 3MT speeches, so I was very thrilled. There are more people working on hydroxyapatite, right? So this initial work was basically we wrote a proposal to NRC, basically looking at, we were at this time, you had this nano fertilizer, right? Not the GOTA-based nano fertilizer, but the fertilizer before that, right? Basically, urea was encapsulated in hydroxyapatite, right? So that it can be controllably released, right? Now, I am a surface scientist also. So, what we want to do is, where do you find hydroxyapatite? I think there was a person who did the hydroxyapatite. It's in your bones, right? It's a basic bone material, hydroxyapatite, right? So, the idea here was, when you have, if anyone who had sports injuries, right, and or transplant these implants and all that, right, they're made of mostly titanium or mostly titanium, right, and for the bone to grow, it needs some interface. What generally people do is you coat it with hydroxyapatite, right, so that bone won't recognize it as an intruder in a foreign object, so it tries to integrate and grow, right? And we are not, I mean, that was the whole idea when we were writing the proposal, right? The urea, not for like, we are not going to put the fertilizer urea there. Urea is the main fundamental group you find in most of the antibiotics, right? So our idea is to basically generate a coating for in situ healing, right? In situ healing, so generating the antibiotic, release of the antibiotic from the coating itself, right? So we wrote this. Of course, we did a literature survey just like you guys, we also did. And there was a fantastic 2 papers that say you can coat, you can get a film of hydroxyapatite, which we tried for a year. We couldn't get it, right? We got the places like clustered films we got, but not the full one, right? Not the full one. There was a problem. Now the grant is there, pressure is there, we are not getting the coating. Then we investigate, right? Why certain places there? We found the orientation of these crystals are different in where the coatings are, right? So we went to study. Now we set aside this work, we went to study the orientation effect on the stability of the coating. Guess what? Nobody has done that part. And we tried several experiments. Now we have full control over the coating stability, where we can change based on the orientation of the crystal orientation. Where did we publish that? Surface Science and Coating, Q1 journal, impact factor 6.5, more than if we had it all figured out, which is 3.9, right? So our hypothesis, what we get didn't work, but that's fine. We went for a higher journal, right? 6.1, right? So sometimes just because your hypothesis is wrong, it doesn't mean, that's why I said at the very beginning, you have to make sure your data is right, your experiments are done right. Then that means when your hypothesis is wrong, there is new science in there, which nobody has looked at. That was the reason for the 6.1, right? That was the reason. So always be on the lookout for where the hypothesis doesn't work. My students come with grim faces. So sir, we can propose sir, the idea is varadi, right? Sir, the idea is varadi. I said no. Sometimes, I mean, it can be, right? But I will be very happy at that point. That is where I really concentrate, right? That means there is something new going on, which can get me to a higher. I'm going to move forward a little bit faster. This is another. So this is adaptability. Though you're focused on something, there may be better things other way around. Then there's another paper which we published, right? This is on basically photocatalytic materials, right? And where this paper got, it went for, after 3 or 4 rejections, went for peer review, right? And after peer review, we got rejected. After peer review, we got rejected. So editorial rejection, after careful evaluation, the manuscript and the reviewer's comments, I regret to inform that you do not find your manuscript suitable for publication. Ayyo, right? How many of you gone through that phase in your uni life? How many of you gone through this phase? Anyone who has gone through this phase will never take a rejection as a rejection, right? Because you see, the reviewers have commented, even though they have rejected, they have commented, and there are some positive things. Right? Commented. I took that option, and I wrote a very nice letter to the editor, right? That is, I don't know whether you can see it here. We sincerely appreciate, right? We sincerely appreciate your comments, and I thank the reviewer who was very bad on us, right? For his time and consideration, and apparently for these reasons he has rejected it, but that's fine. But we find there's a hint of light. We are confident that we can address all these points, right? With that letter, we send the plan of addressing these points, the plan, and send this email. What happens? Editor turned, said, okay, I will let you resubmit, I will let you go. Do you know where it ended up? Back cover of that journal, right? It's the back cover of that journal, okay? Never take rejection for a no. I don't know what will happen after this, right? Right? Never take rejection for a no. This is the adaptability. You have to be flexible, right? You have to be flexible. You have to adapt depending on how things are moving in writing. Then my final one, okay? This one. There are areas where you should never be flexible, right? This is another journal we published. In this particular article, we were talking about solvent effect on the photocatalysis, right? Solvent effect on the photocatalysis. So the reviewers, it went for review after several rejections as usual, and this particular review was very positive. It says the manuscript is interesting and it can be considered for publication after revision. It is already accepted for publication, right? But look what he is writing for us to do. Adsorption is one of the most important. Adsorption is another way of removing pollutants from water, right? So he's asking you to add something about adsorption into this, which is not part of our scope, right? And he give a list of references where we got to know who the reviewer is, right? And see, you have done so much hard work on your research. Is publishing the only thing that we want to get, right? If we go ahead and since he has already accepted, we put everything, we publish, that is what we are going to get, right? You have done so much work to this level, and now we are converting it to something like this. Reviewer may be happy. Now you have published work. Now the entire readership is looking at you like you become a laughing joke, right? Review is just a one person. Once it's published, everybody will be looking at, and your research will be looked at in this form. So please be careful. Your work is very important. It's not simply for whatever the cost publishing. You have to publish in the right way, in a very professional way, right? Where you basically, your readership will value your work, recognize your work, right? And with that, I'm going to close. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Dilushan. I think a very interesting presentation, and after listening to that, I feel like publishing more despite the rejections that we get these days. So it's my, I will introduce our next speaker, Dr. Ranga Rodrigo, a senior lecturer in the Department of Electronic and Communication Engineering at the University of Moratuwa. Dr. Rodrigo has supervised a number of postgraduate students, offering exceptional guidance in both the theoretical and practical dimensions of engineering research. And of course, he's a very respected character within the postgraduates of University of Moratuwa, especially for shaping research ideas and then conducting literature reviews, to designing methodologies and producing high quality publications. So with this extensive experience, today Ranga will lead us through about writing methodology, specifically focusing on methodology planning and effective writing. Over to you, Ranga.
Thank you, Professor Kolathunga, for the introduction. Thank you very much. Professor Dilushan gave a very interesting presentation. Rejection is never a rejection, but that does not apply in every circumstance of your life, dear students. So some rejections are rejections. So we will talk about this. Now one thing I noticed is, I took a picture from the original design. In the original design there's an aircraft, but in the actual construction the aircraft is not there. So that's the difference between an introduction and a methodology. You introduce and promise so many nice things in the introduction in the abstract, but in the actual implementation and results, those are not there. Then the reviewers will be very unhappy about this, and we will talk about those things in my brief presentation. So we'll talk about briefly planning the methodology at the outset, then talk about writing the methodology, and briefly talk about how the introduction, methodology, and the results must be linked. Now just to show you that I briefly know about these things, I put the top 50 list in Google Metrics. So I have been a reviewer for these. So you can see I have some understanding about how people write and how to accept and reject papers in those forums. So this picture also I thought of putting, I usually put this. This is one of the classes that we did for undergrads. Only few students. Who's with the blue t-shirt is the Dr. Jatushan Rajasekharan. So he went to Berkeley after studying here, and I attended his defense online. Jitendra Malik was the professor there, so a father of computer vision, and he called him Ramanujan. So you can see how thrilled I should have been, a Sri Lankan student being called Ramanujan, the great mathematician India has produced. So you also can come up to that stage and produce great work. Now he's at Elon Musk's company XAI. I don't know why. Anyways, I know why, it's the money. So, so we talk about what is research briefly to get into what I want to say. So discovering new things is research, and you know that it is not just doing a Google search, but we have to do creative systematic work undertaken to produce new knowledge. I like this person very much. This is this person who discovered this language called Lisp. He's a computer scientist, and he started the Y Combinator also that talks about these startups and so on. So he designed a language, so you can see he's a great computer scientist, and what he says about research, I don't consider myself to be doing research on programming languages, I'm just designing one. In the same way that someone might be designing a building or a new typeface. I'm not trying to discover anything new. I just want to make a language that will be good to program. In some ways, this assumption makes the life much easier. The difference between design and research seems to be a question on new versus good. Professor Dilushan talked about the novelty question everyone asks. I also ask this novelty question all the time when I review papers. Design doesn't have to be new, but it has to be good, like this hall that has been designed. Research doesn't have to be good, but it has to be new. We have to keep that in mind. So in the methodology or introduction or whatever, we have to show why our work is novel. But as Professor Dilushan mentioned, we have to always start the work with the end in mind. Our end is getting something published, and that publication should establish that our work is novel or there is a contribution. At least say there is a contribution with these few papers lying around. In our line of work, we have to compare results. Professor Dilushan will also agree with that. So to be able to compare results, you have to know what the existing results are. So do the literature search and find out the numbers that others have produced, and keep an eye on what others are producing even right now, and plan to extend those tables. Add your own column or row to those tables. So in order to do that, when the tables are in your mind, you have to then plan the methodology to be able to achieve those. So a little bit of planning is required. So I think sometimes when you work with experienced researchers, you don't have to do that because that researcher or the professor would have planned that for you, and it's in his mind. And when it doesn't work, students will come and complain you. So what you said doesn't work, like Professor Dilushan mentioned. But as a student, as a PhD student especially, since you are responsible of your own work, it is very important to plan these things. So I have come up with this very crooked methodology of how University of Moratuwa students should do research, because lecturers are very bad researchers, because they have all other things to attend, write letters. Now ChatGPT has made that life much easier, a lot of letters to be written every day. So as a novice researcher, starting from the top left corner of yours, you have a general area of interest. Maybe you like this, so therefore you do some Google search, Google Scholar search, and find out the general topics in that area and slightly specify the research area. Then you find few targeted papers. Maybe you see that many people are referencing this paper, so that must be an important paper. This is when your professor doesn't give you the important papers. You have to find the papers on your own, and then you have to find what is in red, the research gap. Finding the research gap is very, very important. It is the holy grail in our area especially, if you find the research gap. So when you find the research gap, then you have to come up with a method to solve that research gap, bridge that research gap. So coming up with a method is not very hard actually, if you know the gap, because other people also have done things like that in the past. So it is, there is an innovation that you have to make, but that innovation is not so hard, because there is existing literature who have done that work up to some extent. So, but we know that this is the method that I showed is very bad. What we must aim for is we must plan to research to solve a problem in the world, research problem, creating an agent like human beings. So, those can be the great research problems, but that crooked way is how to get a publication. Okay. Having said this, we know that the structure of the paper is there. Professor Dilshan spoke about this: introduction, literature review method, MR, method research, then discussion if it is there, and the conclusion. So, method section is what I am talking about. So, now if you have understood the gap, then you have to, from the gap you have to come up with a so-called thesis statement. So, I remember when I was studying in Canada, it was the tsunami time, and there was a wind tunnel in Canada. So, this very famous professor came called Alan Davenport, and we were walking with him to the wind tunnel, and he looked at me, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Sri Lanka now. We are talking about Sri Lanka tsunami." He asked, "What is your thesis?" At that time, I was a young student. I did not have a thesis. So, what that means is, what is that statement that you are going to prove in your work? So, there must be one statement that you prove. For example, if you say the sun will rise in the east tomorrow, that's not a thesis statement, because that probability is 1. When the probability is low and others are doubting, and you think that you can prove that, that's a thesis statement. So, it's a single precise statement that clearly articulates the central argument. So, it is an argument. Your research work is an argument always. So, that argument you have to try to prove, and the way you prove is laid out in the methodology. Actually, your proof, as Professor Dilshan mentioned, is in the data that you obtain through your experiments. So, let's skip to that. So, a strong thesis statement is very important. So, reasonable people could disagree on that topic that you are discussing. That's a strong thesis statement of property of that. So, they must be adequately treatable in using the natural experiments that we can do. Usually expresses one main idea and asserts your conclusions, and there must be a conclusion in that. You must take one side in the thesis statement. You cannot take two sides in the thesis statement. So, for example, there are some negatives and positive aspects to the banana herb research supplement. This is not a thesis statement. So, what is the stand that you are taking? So, you cannot say negatives and positives. This is a politician talk. This is not a researcher's talk. So, it's a weak statement. First, it fails to take a stand. Second, the phrase negative and positive is vague. But if you say something like that, because banana herb tea supplement promotes rapid weight loss that results in the loss of muscle and lean body mass, it possesses a potential danger to customers. Now, you are taking a stand there. So, it's a good thesis statement which you can prove, and see, that's a good thesis statement. So, once the thesis statement is there in your mind, then you can come up with the methodology of establishing that, proving that. So, it establishes the thesis statement, your methodology. So, we have to remember that, and there are so many methodologies available. So, the literature would have given you so many methods of doing that. You have to pick that which is suitable to establish your thesis statement, the general methodology. Then, of course, you can discuss with your professor, your peers and so on, and come up with the specific techniques using which you would solve this. Then the other part is the method should have the transparency and reproducibility. These are two important things. Transparent means when the person reads it, he or she must be able to understand what you have done. And once a person is able to understand, that person must be able to reproduce that. Professor Dilshan also spoke about it, that you yourself must be able to reproduce that by looking at what you have written in the paper, and also the other researchers must be able to reproduce that by carrying out the experiments that you have done. So, therefore, sufficient amount of information must be given in the methodology, unless you have patented it and you want to keep the Guru Mushtiya with you and slightly change some parameter or hide something. I mean, these kind of things happen. So, we have a recent paper we can take 3 ultrasound scans and we can make a 3D reconstruction of the liver. This is very important. So, we have published a paper in a very good conference, top radiology conference of course, and we have not revealed every single thing in that. Some parameters we know, we cannot reveal all the parameters. So, then there is commercial value also retained in that work. So, I think we all know all these things. It must be clearly and precisely described, because others must be able to understand that and reproduce. and must support replication of the work. So researchers think like that. So when I'm dead and gone, my work must remain and others must be able to reproduce my work. So it must be reproducible. Thirdly, provides justification for each choice. Now, politicians are very good at this, right? They will say, මේ පාර්ලිමේන්ත මේ contractor තෝරගත්තේ මෙන්න මේ කාරණාව නිසා. We selected this contractor to build this bridge because of this reason, right? I mean, they have always a reason, but the researchers, do we have a reason for the choices that you made in the methodology section? I chose this chemical, I chose this computer, I chose this algorithm. For all these things, we must have a justification. So if you cannot justify by small experiments, you must justify by intimidation. What is justification by intimidation? You cite a paper of a very powerful person. You cite the paper of Rudolf P. Kalman. Kalman built a paper. Now you cannot argue against it. Like that, you have to justify every choice, single choice that you make in the paper, methodology. And we have to well organize that and keeping the reader in mind, story-like flow. So actually, they say when you write a paper, you must take the reader along a journey with you. The reader will ask you questions. Why are you saying this? Then I say, okay, I am saying this because of this. How do you do that? And then you give, okay, this is how I do that. Like that, you engage with the reader and take him along a journey. So this story-like writing is extremely important. Then I think briefly talk about the components also. So a general overview is very important. Professor Dilushan spoke about the pictorial abstract. So in some of our papers, we give a teaser picture to quickly describe what the paper is. This is very important, especially given the less span of attention now reviewers have, because they get so many papers to review. For example, in our conferences, they get 30,000 papers. So you can see the massive review team that must be there. So attention span is very low. So if they do not quickly quickly convince a person that the paper is nice to read, he will not give sufficient attention to read that paper. So the graphical abstract, block diagram, and so on are extremely important. Actually, sometimes people take that methodology diagram and put it at the very top of the paper. So some people do that. So algorithms, training procedures, data, experiment, data collection method, all these things, implementation details are part and parcel of the methodology section. So when you do that, please refer to figures and tables within text also, and captions are very important. It is repetition actually. It's there in the methodology text also, and you write the same thing in the caption also, because some papers, when the reviewers actually do that, they would maybe quickly they will go through the figures and read the captions. So give meaningful captions for people to understand. So now let's briefly talk about how to link these three things, introduction, method, and results. Introduction, we know, is I would say most important part is introduction, because you want to get the paper accepted. So when I make decisions about accepting the paper, that decision has to be made once I finish the introduction. If I do not finish, if I do not get that decision once I finish reading the introduction, that means it's a borderline decision. So in our area of research, we have decisions borderline accept, borderline reject, weak accept, weak reject, strong accept, strong reject. Those are the 5 Likert criteria that we have in our area. So if I have to go past the introduction, that's a borderline definitely. So introduction must be very, very important. That's why Professor Dilushan said you write the introduction last, and usually the professor writes the introduction. And when professor writes the introduction, unnecessary nitty-gritty details that the student wants to write are taken off also, and the most important picture that has to be presented will be presented. So it has to be written last, but although it has to be written last, I think the student has to write the introduction by himself as soon as he has the first results. Because sometimes the arguments are not nicely lined up in his mind. So there's some missing part in the experiment. To distinguish that, I suggest the students to write the introduction by himself or herself. Then he will find out, oh, my argument is not complete because of this problem. I cannot argue it out and justify my methodology, or I cannot justify my results when you write the the introduction. But finally, please ask your professor to write the introduction, it's important. So motivation gap, approach, results and conclusion, these are the 5 factors that our area of people use in the introduction. But usually the motivation in some of these papers is, especially Mercon papers, is the world poverty, like that extremely large motivations. These motivations are too large for research. I think they have to be research specific motivations. So identification of the gap, approach, results, conclusion, these are 5 important parts in the introduction. But I mean, you don't put subtopics and say, but let the researcher, let the reader understand that these things are there in the introduction to make that argument. But then the method, of course we looked at this, it must fulfill the commitment that you made. So in the introduction, I showed the contrast of the picture and the actual construction here. In the original picture, Professor Gopura, there was an aircraft. That aircraft is missing in the actual construction. So in the introduction, the person present said that to the city there is an aircraft coming. In the actual methodology, that aircraft is missing. So of course the reviewer will reject the paper. What you promised in the introduction is not there in the actual construction. So that's the fulfillment of the commitment that you made in the introduction. Yeah. So then, and contains unmotivated elements. What that means is, you did not motivate that in the introduction, but you are putting that in the method. That is not good, because then the reviewer will be very surprised. You did not promise to talk about this, but now you are talking about this in the method. So that is not good. So motivate that and put that in the method section, and of course provide all necessary details for the reproducibility, justify each choice. I spoke about that. And finally, to link with the results, establishes confidence of the validity of the results. For example, you cannot plan a very simple experiment and establish a result in a very important circumstance like Professor Dilushan described, right? So the experiment must be substantially complicated and properly scientific to be able to justify the results. So I think with this, you should be able to link the methodology with the results. So if we summarize what we described, the most important thing in a paper, I think, is the introduction. That introduction gives you the argument and the motivation and what you want to do that and what is the research gap, and that you have fulfilled or bridged that research gap. Now the reviewer will look for evidence whether you have actually built that research gap in your method and results. The reviewer will know, okay, with this the person should have been able to bridge that research gap. It is true, this paper is true. And with the results, you actually establish that actually it has been bridged. Yes. Professor Dilushan's Angelina Jolie picture, actually I like to use for the fulfillment of the commitment one also. Yes. So makeover shows that it's the introduction with makeup Angelina Jolie, but the real Angelina Jolie, which is in the methodology and the results, is without the makeover. Then it's very bad. Okay, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ranga, for that very interesting presentation. Now, may I invite Professor Dilushan and Ranga to the stage. By the way, Ranga, until they arrange the chairs, in the introduction there was an aircraft, and for me, there's an aircraft there as well. It could be that the reviewer didn't see it as an aircraft. Okay? So, a very good point for us to think.
To start with the questions, I'm sure our postgraduate researchers, and we have staff members and also the undergrads, if you have any questions to be asked from our speakers, this is your time.
First of all, I would like to thank both the presenters. It was really engaging and very interesting. I would like to ask a small thing, because some of our research, or most of the research that we do, which has national level significance, because there are so many research to be done to enhance the quality in Sri Lanka and various sectors and all. So when you are trying to focus too much on Sri Lankan context, and when you are trying to publish in an international journal, the one problem that we usually face is it is not generalizable. To a larger context, your focus is too much narrowed to one particular country, and based on that, we face a lot of rejection. So do you have any advice how we can publish in a very focused or a localized journal or a good research in a wider context audience?
So, if I get your question right, publishing in local context or
No,
publishing something
research
localized
done on
in
a-
an
yeah,
international
in an
level?
international context.
First of all, that much of rejection is not necessarily our science is bad. Because the moment there was, I will give you one example. I submitted a paper before I left for work. Finally, after staying late night, I finally submitted it. And I prepared myself and had my breakfast and went to my office. This was the very interesting thing I had. By that time, within that span of 1 hour, the editor has read the paper carefully and has rejected the paper, which took me even to write the cover letter almost the entire night, right? And this has been happening a lot. And we realized that sometimes the editor not reject just because of the science is bad. Unfortunately, we come from a country where we don't have a good reputation also in terms of writing, right? So we have, there are these issues. So when it comes to local, the paper I showed you, it's actually with the mineral resources. So it has a pretty much importance, but it's the way we pitch in the journal. The way we pitch is we have to pitch yes, we are looking at an international audience, but we have to show how important what we see in this local setting, how important it is to the international audience. It is our responsibility to show that, right? So I think it is how we write, and the quality of the research is also important to go into that level. So that's my take on it.
I fully agree with Professor Dirushan. So all the papers that I have also all are double blind. No one knew who the authors were, that we are from Sri Lanka. Otherwise, that would have not resulted in these papers. So that's a disadvantage. So, but as a country, I think we have to get together and become a scientifically worthwhile nation. So that aspect is always there, and I fully agree with Professor Dirushan that we have to cook the potatoes that we have the way those people like it. His presentation aspect actually. Yes.
And of course, sometimes we use it also to a certain extent to get the APC waiver.
Okay, any other questions from the audience? So until we reach there, I will ask another question. How are we going to convince a reviewer who doesn't has the same perspective of our research methodology? Say, for example, when we've been very careful when we are selecting examiners for our PhD students, because they could view our methodology in a very different manner. So if that happens in our research paper, which we will not have any control of, how are we going to convince a reviewer who will who would have a different perspective regarding the methodology?
Not too sure actually. We have always relied on the voting power other reviewers have. So based on that, the average score will be looked at by the editor, or in our cases, so we call it the area chairs, and they will favorably look at the paper. So if we have a person who seriously does not like our methodology, it's very hard to convince, because it's at a very fundamental level that he's disagreeing with us. So it's very hard, madam.
Okay.
To add to that, the reviewers are actually helping the editor to, editor is the one who makes the decision. So the reviewer is somebody who helps the editor in making the decision. So as Ranga said, it's not just one reviewer. Most of the time it is 3 reviewers, right? So the editor, it's up to the editor whether to take that and go forward. And also there have been instances where the reverse, for example, the one that got rejected, right? It was very difficult to convince that reviewer. But then we wrote, I mean, we have covered every part of the methodology that he is always proposing alternative work, which basically gives the same information. So we tell that separate when in the submission process where you have a area where you can directly communicate with the editor without the reviewers knowing. So we generally make use of that part to tell the editor directly, here, come on, we have given enough evidences, what the reviewer is suggesting is basically alternative methods to get the same information. And then of course it is up to the editor to accept or not.
Thank you.
And like Professor Dilshan mentioned, the rebuttal or the comments that we write afterwards is very important in that case, right? But usually any unfair person should be responsive to the logic that we make, right? And there's a person who oversees that argument that is going between us and the reviewers, so fortunately.
My question is about research writing. Is there any order writing, like, because when I'm writing the research, what I felt is if I start from the introduction, because if I write the introduction, because I wanted to start, first finish the literature and after that methodology, and after everything I wanted to write the introduction. But again, what I felt is it's better to write introduction first, then I know where I'm going and where I'm finishing like that. It's what I felt is that, but most of the advices I got is do not write the introduction first, write the introduction later. So what is your comment on that? Thank you.
I think Ranga answered that question because I'm not, in my thing, it's not writing the introduction before, you submit the manuscript after you have everything done. But as I think Ranga very clearly said, the student has to initiate, of course you have to have a structure, right? You need to know the research problem and what's the background research. So in a way you are writing the introduction, but it's not structured to the publication ready level. So you have to start with that. But it is not the final introduction. You will see actually your first introduction to what introduction you submit is quite different.
I fully agree with Rohit Dilshan.
Any questions? Any other questions?
Thank you very much for that presentation. So I'd like to get your ideas or your strategy to create a more attractive research title, manuscript title. That's also an area where we always will be getting comments. So some strategies to have some good titles. Any strategies that you are currently using?
I'm really bad at selecting titles, right? If it is plain, I would like plain, right? But one strategy I use, it has to represent the work that you are doing, right? So major part of what is being covered should be there. And generally, when the editor review, it goes to the editor first. So when the editor reviews, editor goes through the title as well as your cover letter is really, really important, and maybe the abstract and the conclusions, right? And if the editor sees that the rest of it is fine, editor proposed. There are 2 instances where I have got requests from the editor to change the title. And most of the time it was easy for me because he suggested. So that way it's a bit good, but I think it's a very, I don't know, do you have an idea?
I also tend to write technically correct titles, but I know people write very attractive
There are
titles.
people who write,
Yes.
but I don't think none of our papers are that attractive in the title.
For example, if you take the paper that powers the Google search, ChatGPT and so on, the so-called transformer paper, title is "Attention is all you need." So you can see everyone can understand what that means, but it has a very deep technical meaning. But what it means is true. So therefore, they got the citation, 200,000 citations right now. So now you can see the it's attention-grabbing title also. So I think for that to happen, I think you must be a very powerful researcher, right?
Yeah, artist
Very,
of.
yeah. So now you conquered it. You don't care whether the paper gets accepted or not. You know that if you just put it on online, people will start citing that. Then you can take that risk. I think at this stage, I'm not ready to take that risk. And editor shouting at me.
And I mean, once your paper is published, a catchy title is good. But before that, I think it has to represent. And the other thing is, good thing about with the search engines and all, if your title have all the required keywords, right? So it will be easily accessible to somebody who's searching for the title. So citation may be a good option when you have the keywords in the title. So even the technical words. So it's a give and take.
It's a very important question, though.
Okay, I've got a question now. I'm coming from, most of my publications are towards the social sciences, and we have quite a number of students from that discipline. Generally, how we structure a paper is we have an introduction, literature review, methodology, and then results and discussion. But what happens at the end is, from the introduction, from the literature review, we tend to repeat the same areas. And Ranga, now in your, I think towards the end, you showed a structure where you had the introduction, methodology, and results. Is that the case in your discipline?
No, madam, actually, what you said is the correct thing. What we also do, but what I wanted to show was the connection between these.
Okay, so if that is
consistency must be applied.
Like that. So if that is the same, how to, any guideline or any guidance that you can give to avoid this repetition? Because from the introduction itself, we develop the research problem, and then from the literature also, we tend to go back to the problems that has been highlighted in the introduction in a kind of elaborated manner. So how, any advice that you can give to avoid the repetition within the introduction and the literature
review? I mean, it's about the story. When you read, generally, when you go through at the end before you submit, if you feel that it tells the story that you want to communicate to the reader, right? And yes, of course, there can be repetition. I generally allow purposefully certain amount of repetition because for some reason, some readers, they don't look at the introduction nor the methodology, they directly read the results and discussion. So simply by directly reading the results and discussion, they should be able to get that idea what the paper is all about. So if you have, even though it's a repetition of that, for somebody who's reading through, for another person, simply it gives the entire content of the research paper. When you have the research problem, so generally in most of my publications, I give my first paragraph in the results and discussion is actually a summary of what was that being repeated. Because I know editors also sometimes don't go through everything. They directly go to results and discussion. So there is an advantage of repetition, but it is how you write the repetition.
Yeah.
So if you can repeat the same context in a different form, even another reader may not even see it as a repetition.
Thank you.
So I'm an early researcher and just starting on my research journey. So I've been doing the literature review and the survey. So what I realized is that most of the very good journal papers and mostly the journal papers are very complexly, the writing is very complex. Sometimes you need to read it 2 to 3 times to understand what they're saying. So it makes me think, is it necessary for the writing to be that complex? Or can the message be written in simpler ways? But sometimes, because of the wording and things, it's hidden sometimes. You have to read again and again. So I'm just wondering, is it necessary for it to be that complex, or can it be written simply?
Research paper need not be complex, at least when you're writing. But even if I now read a research paper, I think I would have to read couple of times to understand. Because, I mean, it takes time. You have to get used to, but with time, of course, you will get used to it. And now, of course, as I said, I don't read the entire paper, because with experience, you know which parts contains the important sections that you are looking for. But for a new student, if you're getting into research, congratulations, right? I think it is, you should read. I think I basically encourage my students to read not only 1-2 times, they have to read 10-15 times, right? Because then only they really get the sense of what is being discussed. But generally, if you're writing, it's very good if you can keep it as simple as possible.
Just to add to that correct suggestion, maybe the very first paper you may have to read 15 times, but when you come to the second paper, it will be much faster to understand. Because when you get into a new field, everything looks jargon to you. Later on, those jargons will become part and parcel of your vocabulary. Then it becomes easier. Yes.
Let me add one. It will be difficult to understand for you very first time, but if your supervisor asks you to write the manuscript, right, then it will get into you.
Adding on to that, adding on to her question, so when we write journal papers, we have to think about people who'd rather see the visual appeal as well as the academic appeal. So that's, how do you balance that? Like you said, sometimes when you provide a visually appealing data through pictorial methods, and sometimes the content might be really heavy, that we might have to stick to a textual method. So how does a researcher balance that?
Even if my slides you see, I am pretty much of a visual person, right? But you always have the appendix, right? So if I mean, you have to balance, because we don't know what the reviewer perception. Reviewers come from various backgrounds. Maybe they are visual, maybe they need more data, more evidences, right? So it's good to keep a balance, right? And of course, we have to be mindful about because certain journals have restriction, page restrictions, word restrictions, but they won't count the words on the schematic, right? So you have to be a little bit smart also. And so you put everything in a schematic, like what we did there, and we had more details in the appendix, where appendix, you can have any I don't know, in my field, appendix, you can put a lot of things there, right? But it's always good to keep a balance.
I think to add to that, if you want to submit to this particular journal, you can look at a few papers in that journal and taste what the taste of the community is. Yes. Because a certain community reads that journal. So if you are submitting to that, write in that fashion. In my area, of course, everything is visual, computer vision, so everything is visual. So you cannot get much advice from me.
No, I think you're absolutely right. It is, of course, you will be referring journals, articles from those journals, so you would get a feel of how it is being presented in those journals. So that's the best clue, actually.
Dear sir.
Okay, you come to a very good point, where I had a lot of conflicts with a lot of people, right? These days, everybody you talk to say, we have to do commercialization, we have to apply for patent, national interest and all that. And the researchers or academics are only concerned about publication, right? Honestly, I tell to them, yes, I am concerned about publication because that is my job, right? I am a researcher, I am an academic, my output is a publication, right? When it comes to patentable novel ideas, I think publishing is still very important, right? But how the timing is the matter, right? Now, generally what I do, my approach is I do not publish anything until I have the entire patent thing is drafted and ready, right? But before I submit the patent, I submit the publication, right? That's the timing. So it's about timing. So my publication, I have both ready, and then I submit my publication, and then subsequently my patent. It depends on, if this is for a US patent, that's allowed, because in a US patent, I think there is a grace period of 1 year. If it is publication is also yours and the patent is also yours, you can they consider 1 year, within that 1 year if you publish and then subsequently patent, that's fine, they take it. But it depends on the country to country, what their local patent authorities are doing. The important thing about publishing is, now when I say publication, I really, this is where myself and sometimes my students get into conflict, right? Their work is good, they come and ask me, sir, there is this competition, can I present this data in that competition, right? Then it's a conflict. I really want them to present because the results are good, but then I explain to them, okay, you present in the competition, I'm sure you will be winning, right? But then what would you value more? Is the certificate you're getting from winning that competition, or will it be a patent certificate, right? Obviously, patent certificate is much more value, right? And then there are a lot of occasions where we have purposefully withheld until we have the patent ready. And then only we submit even for presentations and all. And publishing and presentations are really good because these are your marketing tools. When publication and publication and presentation, people get to know what you're doing. But the unfortunate thing is they cannot do what you did because it's been protected, right? So timing is really important.
So if you are going for a US patent, there's a provisional patent also.
Yeah, there's a provisional patent also.
Maybe $100 or something. Yeah. So you can apply for that provisional patent. And university has the enterprise. If you go to that office, they'll be able to help you, and they have a lot of knowledge about these processes and so on. If it is patentable, be sure to patent that.
Dear sir, predatory publishers are growing in this digital area. So how to identify predatory publisher or journal? Are you on next?
Predatory publication.
How to identify a predatory journal? Yes. If you're planning to publish in one of them, you will identify. Right? But please don't. Right? Generally, as a habit, I really don't publish. If you go to my website and see my records, I really don't publish anything other than in ACI. So I have very limited publication list. Because my idea is not publishing everything I want everywhere. Because we work very hard for our research, right? It's very, very hard work we do. And we want to make sure it goes to the right journal, which has a wider readership, and it is appreciated. So really, we don't even, I generally don't even look at, but sign of predatory journals is where you have a APCs of 25 USD or 30 USD that you can get the publication, then you have to be a bit careful.
Just to add to what Professor Dirushan said, know your journals and conferences in your area. You have to know them. And then being in the Beers list, the website itself containing mistakes, having bogus indices like not impact factor, impact index, like that self-developed indices, not having a latex template, not having a proper editorial office, publishing in 2 days, publishing in 1 week, promising quick publication. All these things are signs of predatory journals. You have to run away from them. You cannot erase those records from your life. You have to run away from those things.
And there is a temptation also, because some of these journals and conferences, there are conferences also. They approach you in such a way, esteemed researcher, right? then I feel, what is esteemed about me? Right? You know yourself, right? I mean, forget about anybody else. You know where you are. I mean, I haven't published in Nature or Science to be esteemed, right? So it's a take. So you have to be very careful how those things are worded, and that itself gives a clue as to whether it's predatory or not. This happens now. This is happening very much, especially for conferences.
And I think adding to that, generally they tend to use similar names of well-reputed journals. Yeah. It's very difficult to catch them.
And reputed scientists also. Yes. I got one, actually, it was so well done, the invitation and all, asking for a conference in Rome. I was very happy. I was invited to talk, so very much happy, and it has a list of very good speakers there. And they even said, we will sponsor your 2-night stay or this thing. But I was very happy because there were some very good researchers which I wanted to actually meet. So what I did is just want to make sure, I wrote to one of them. I wrote to one of them and asked, I'm excited to, I mean, we don't want to, I mean, if it is a real thing, we don't want to put that organizers in trouble, right? So I wrote to the speaker and said, I will be delighted to meet you. I'm waiting to meet you, looking forward to meet you at this conference. Please, can I get some time from it? He wrote to me immediately, Dilshan, I don't know anything about it. Right? So that's another way to approach.
So the question is about starting a new area of research as an undergraduate, right? Yes. Yeah, I see it like this. For example, if I want to learn carpentry, I will walk to Morotumul and meet a carpenter there and ask him, okay, කොහොමද මේ පුටු හදන්නේ? So like that, I think you have to meet a researcher in the university, a professor, like that, and ask him, how do you get into this area? Rather than trying to discover it yourself, because you can do that, but it will take a long time, sir, right? I think an experienced person should usually guide you initially.
Yeah, I think you need, and sometimes, I think he's absolutely right, because you are starting into it, you are getting into it, you need a little bit of guidance in terms of identify the novelty aspect of it, right? Now when we put in our research, we give research to undergraduates, both the undergraduates, when we put up the titles, right? Generally, I am the coordinator of that research. So as a habit, I have asked them, don't come to me only. All of you have to go and talk to all the supervisors and find out which research interests you, and then select. But then apparently there will be situations where 2 or 3 people like the same research, right? Then there can be internal conflict. But I mean, it depends. But that is good for the supervisor, because in that case, supervisor get to interview and select the best person that can work with him or her. But as a new, you have to find the novelty. I mean, you need some guidance. And as he said, like, you need to go to that particular place and it's fine.
Because all these things are required. As human beings, we have limited number of years during which we can do research, right? So those years you have to optimally use. and you have to find out on which topic you should invest your years. So that's why an experienced person should tell you how to start, where to start, what are the papers to look for, and so on. And then I think you will save years of wasted energy by doing that.
I may add to that what he mentioned in social science. I met this Uber driver. I got into a taxi, right? And I got into taxi from University of Colombo. We had a discussion. And he said he was a student at University of Jawaharlal. He's a social scientist. He's studying the behavior of the three-wheel driver, that culture. I said, this guy is fantastic. He is studying it while he has got into that culture. And apparently, then I asked him, how are you getting it? No, nobody knows that I am a student, right? So that's absolutely the wonderful way of doing research. So I wished him very well. I would like to get in again, see what his thesis would have been. Because I'm pretty sure it would have been a very nice thesis.
Okay, thank you very much. I think since we are running out of time, we will stop at this point. I would like to thank Professor Dilrushan and Dr. Ranga for the interesting presentation. Before we conclude this particular session, there's another task assigned for me, that is to launch the Bolguda Plains.
The launch of Bolguda Plains magazine, version 5, issue 2. So as you can see, a number of staff members and researchers, they have published in this particular volume. And this time, the editor-in-chief is Professor Meedenia. Okay, so I'm sure some of the staff members and researchers who are in the audience may have published here as well. And this will be available in the website, and you all can go through some of the previous versions of Bolguda Plain magazine as well. Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I will hand over to Suthira to conclude the session.
Thank you very much, madam. Indeed, it was a very insightful and impactful session, and I hope everyone learned something out of it. Everyone seems to be motivated to write more research papers. So, to appreciate their effort, now it's a time to present the tokens of appreciation to our panelists as well as the moderator for the day. So, to present the tokens of appreciation, I cordially invite Dean Faculty of Graduate Studies, Senior Professor Ruwan Gopur onto the stage. First, let's present the token of appreciation to Professor Dilrushan Jayasundara. And then Professor Rangarodrugu. Thank you very much for joining with us today, sir. It was really impactful. And let's present the token of appreciation to our dear moderator too, Professor Undiagani Kulatunga. Shall we give a good round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? With that, we are reaching to the end of another impactful session here at University of Moratuwa Research Week 2025.